Hey everyone, welcome to the AI Branding Academy podcast, where we talk about the integration and meeting point of content, branding, marketing, and everything AI, trying to give you guys the tools and knowledge you need to prepare for a future that's AI powered and completely different than it is right now. Today, I have one of our AI branding partners, Matt Olson, the founder of MGO Studios, and we're going to be talking about websites, specifically the function of websites today and kind of where they may lead to in the near future. So, welcome, Matt.
Hi, thanks for having me.
All right. So, websites, I was in website development for like 6 years or so, and I've built quite a few. I have lots of opinions about what they're for and how they work. But I really think all of it's kind of changing these days. So what's your current perception of the purpose of websites when it comes to marketing and branding companies?
I think the main purpose is, and will continue to be, it's the forward-facing, most visible part of your brand as a company, and it's just something that you have to have to put out, your best foot forward on them. It helps you, generate leads, tells people what you're about, what you stand for, and then obviously it helps you sell, what it is that you sell.
Nice. Okay, so pretty much where it's always been, and like the headquarters of the brand online.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think it's going to be more, especially as some of the social platforms become more and more saturated and change the rules a bit. I think it's going to be more a spot where you kind of start to bring your own community into, right, to
Yeah.
sort of keep them in your ecosystem as opposed to on somebody else's space that you rent from them.
Ah, I love that. A lot of people don't really think about, how social media works or how search engines work or any of the big platforms. You just think like, oh, it's just a public space that we all use. But though I always tell people, I'm like, no, that's your competitor. Ideally, all of your customers come to your website for the knowledge that they need. And then when they're ready to buy, they've already been coming to the website. But so many people just look at it as basically like a sales brochure. Like, okay, I'll put all my stuff on there to impress people so they take whatever the next step is. Now, have you seen any kind of changes, I don't know, in the last 5 years or so? Because I was in it a while back, and it seems like it works essentially the same as it usually does. I think more people have websites, but they're still using them basically how they always have.
Yeah, I think they're using them basically how they always have. I think some are getting a lot more content on them now, now especially that they can generate it faster with the AI stuff. But yeah, I think, it hasn't changed a ton yet, but I think we're on the cusp of things kind of really, making a turn.
Nice. I like that. What's the turn you're kind of predicting?
Um, again, like I said, kind of having it act more like a community for people like in your ecosystem to gather, or people that are like-minded to gather and get new information on a regular basis, right? Kind of like almost like like a coffee shop, or
Mhm.
like some of the Facebook groups. I belong to, I don't know, dozens of Facebook groups that I go into on a regular basis. I think I'd like to see that kind of change to where it goes to other people's own ecosystems and out of those programs.
Yeah, well, and I think that the trends, especially for like the younger generations, are leading towards that. Like saying that you're going onto Facebook for anything, I'm sure for a Gen Zer is like, okay, grandpa. Like, I still use it because I'm like, our whole community's on there. But I do think that you're right. The transition is happening. I think we're just starting to understand the game. Because in social media, like they've made so many decisions on how traffic goes, where they essentially discourage everybody from leaving the website, literally penalizing you if you put, say, external link within a post, which is why you see a lot of people like me. I'll say, link in comments, and it's specifically there because you know that they're not going to share the information if you're sending people off platform. But even that, it really shows people like, hey, this is not your buddy. Your buddy wants to send you traffic without you paying for every single thing. And I think up until like kind of the recent domination of TikTok, where people are saying like, oh no, I get traffic, I make money from TikTok without having to spend money on the ad platform necessarily, is really shifting it. And I've seen that on Facebook where they're actually sharing more organic content. I don't know about how much traffic you're getting from it, but it is
Brand
shifting.
awareness for sure on
Yeah.
TikTok, right?
Yeah, well, technically you get that from all platforms, but like even like LinkedIn wants to be the next Google essentially, like the only content you need to read is going to be on LinkedIn. And I'm like, I don't think people like that anymore. And I think they don't trust it, I personally don't.
I don't think that people can trust it like a single source. I know that I don't. I mean, just because it's, I mean, even if you've got people talking from both sides of the aisle on a political thing, or on ideas for marketing or business, I think that you need to be in different communities and different spaces to kind of see what other people are saying, on both sides, and you can't do that just in one spot.
Yeah. No. Well, and honestly, like I want as much control as they have, right? Like I want to, I always call it privatizing your following. But if you want to privatize your following, most businesses need to do a lot more work than they think they need to in terms of updating their websites with new content. I mean, honestly, when you look at most websites, like half of them don't even have like the address, like the business address in a place where people can find.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
it's
I think it's just exactly what you said. I mean, people are going to have to be putting as much content on their own websites as there are on social media, right? In order to kind of generate that interest of wanting to come back.
yeah.
So, I mean, I think it's really going to like up the ante on the load of content people
Oh yeah.
want need to put out to get people to come back.
Now, for the websites that you build, how do you kind of infuse them with more content? Because a lot of people, when you say content, they kind of freak out and they're like, "Oh, I don't have time for that," or that's not going to make me money, so I don't want to spend time on it. And I usually argue that it's an operational, imperative where it's like, "Hey, you should build the FAQ section because it'll literally make your customer service easier to execute. But how do you go about just convincing your clients like, hey, we need to add a lot of content on here?
You almost have to beat them over the head with a baseball bat on it sometimes. Yeah, I mean the FAQ section is definitely a good space to start, and I always recommend that. I mean, just me as my own business owner, there's so many things that you get asked on a regular basis that if you could just put that out there on your website, and help people out and help them find their stuff, and then from that, even with the FAQ section, you could then turn those into like a direct marketing campaign, and you could reach out to your email list and send those out. So I recommend that. One thing that I got turned on recently by some really very smart guy I know was creating content machines, in particular podcasts. So like one of my next ones, I actually have one set up on Friday this week to kick off doing their brand pillars, and we're going to do really kind of rebrand this company. They're a nonprofit that's kind of near and dear to my heart, and we're gonna do their whole brand book, and then we're gonna start creating their podcast. So it'll be video and audio, some long form, short form, and then from that we'll take those and turn them into short form stuff to put on spaces like TikTok and Facebook and Reels, and then have them translated and turned into text content as well.
Nice. I love that. Well, and podcasting is an excellent way to add lots of content without actually having to try super hard. Because I always tell people in terms of making up content, like podcasting is the easiest by far because all it is a conversation that you're probably going to have anyways. And now you just recorded it and now you have, I don't know how many were 30,000 words. Like you have quite a bit of
Yeah.
information on there.
And then just with that, and then with those 30,000 words, you can break it up into so many different smaller pieces of things that then you can give, graphic treatments to for visual
Mhm.
stuff, and send out. I mean, it's just like a gold mine. And, I think especially if the companies are in an area where they have a lot to teach to their clients on a regular basis, that when they're working with them, marketing companies are like that, but nonprofits as well are like that. I mean, they just have a lot to talk about and a lot to explain. They've got so much opportunity to make content that they could put new stuff out every single day and not hit it all, right?
Yep. No, well, and the thing is with content is sometimes that happens. It happens often where like your content doesn't land or it's not clear enough or all these different reasons. But I think people think that, if they failed once, then like they're done. It didn't work. Content doesn't work. And then you stop generalizing and just be like, yeah, most of content doesn't work. The biggest creators are actually putting out sometimes dozens or hundreds of pieces every day. And, it's just how, the magic works between the content and the platform and the content and the user and the content and the time of day, the content and current events. Like there's no way you could even predict what's going to happen. So you just got to get out there and make lots of stuff and then you'll figure it
Right.
out,
And you just figure it out exactly. And I think I mean, you get better as you go along. But even some of those things that don't really hit, it's still, I think, especially if it's posted somewhere like on your website or a spot where people can go and access it. I mean, I think it builds brand equity and it gives people who are newcomers that maybe haven't heard of you and just got turned on to, you can go through and go, oh my God, look at all this, information that they have. It's, what a value, and go through and still, really get something out of it. And then, if these companies are looking to somewhere down the road go and sell their company, they can point to that as an asset, you know.
Oh yeah. Well, and I repeat the same thing all the time where I'm like, yeah, the brand equity will add maybe millions of dollars of value to your company because it's not just a revenue stream or a list of clients, it's a database of information. And now since we have AI, you could essentially just take that data set, plug it into an AI, and now you could find out everything you want about a brand without actually doing any work. You know, it's
Yeah, summarize
it's
it.
incredible, but most companies don't have that information. So if you're saying, okay, client, we need to like the nonprofit you're working with, yeah, you start podcasts, but what kind of content creation does that lead to for the website itself? Would you say like a post per podcast episode, or like how does it impact the
I think
volume?
it depends on what the podcast episode is. I think some of them will be one post. I think some of them, in particular with this one, I mean, could turn into multiple posts. It's for a rare chromosome disorder that the people who get it have never heard. Nobody's heard of this thing. And so I think it's you do a podcast episode and it becomes at least a blog post, if not several. It becomes several social media posts that can educate people on potentially like mini magazines or lead generation type stuff, and maybe even some of it gated behind a paywall for if you donate a certain amount a month, you get access to this type of information, right? So, I mean, lots of potential that we're fleshing out for that.
I love that. Well, and then you have, like you said before, the splintering, of content for social media, where once you have, the piece. And I always say, like, as long as the home base is on the website. So for like my podcast, I always have a podcast post category on the website. And then once I have that, then I'll distribute it through whatever platforms. But most of the time when I'm sharing it online, I'm not going to send people to iTunes, or I host through Buzzsprout. I'll send them back to the website episode, and that way I get
Exactly.
traffic, right?
You get the traffic there, and then maybe they hit on something else on your website. Maybe if they can access the podcast there, they'll listen to that in the background while they're doing something else on your site, right?
I love that. Yeah, and it's easy, and honestly, even from I was talking about operations, but like an operational perspective, it's way easier to say, hey, new employee, here's the post list on the website. It contains all of our episodes. I need you to go through each one of the episodes and find a 15-second clip that we could share on social this week, because the theme of this week is X, and that's how I need to do. So even from like just running your business perspective, it actually adds a ton of value without actually having to try. Now let's talk about SEO, because I know, I have my major concerns about the direction of SEO and what Google's going to come out with based on their own press releases and press conferences. What do you think's happening with SEO, and how is it going to potentially impact website traffic?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's at a spot where everything's changing for SEO, for SEO, right? Especially with so many people kind of jumping into just like a chat GPT or some of these other assistant tools where they're asking the questions that they want to know in there instead of searching the web in a traditional way on Google. I think it's kind of getting turned on its head, and even more so as the months and months go by. So um, I don't think it's going to completely die and go away. I mean, you're always going to need to have your sites optimized for search engines, but how that like formula gets tweaked to work for AI and chatbots and stuff is is going to be interesting for sure.
Oh yeah. Well, and I think it's I mean what we've seen, we're also excited about AI, but if you really think about it, they've stolen all of the content that we've all made from the last 20, not 20 years, probably 10 years at least, and have are now powering their monetized AI with our content. Like that's the way I see it. And so I'm kind of like, in the future, not only will you need a website, but you'll actually have to start securing or trademarking or some AI variation of that system in order to protect your content from being used to make somebody else money. Do you see? I mean, just and this is I probably should have given you this before so you could think about it, but in terms of preparing your client's content for this situation where it could be stolen by AI, are you, I don't know, trademarking all the pages? I know we always have our copyright at the bottom, but are you doing anything else extra?
That's going to be uh, challenging. I think trademarking everything you put out. So I mean, one way to do things. I mean, depending on the company and the site. I mean, if it's especially if it's an educational type thing where the content really is valuable, I think there's going to be a lot of cases where you can just start gating the stuff, right? And you put some of it out forward facing that the bots and anybody can get, but
Mm.
it's a short summary of things maybe, or just a teaser. And if you want more, you got to give us your at least your email address or something to get
Oh
to get
yeah.
a account to get past this, you know, uh, gated, paywall or freemium type model.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, and you see that a lot with like, what Associated Press or The Atlantic. Like these websites have, they'll tease you with the content. They'll say, "Oh, here's the first 100 words or something," and then if you want to read the rest, which I don't think it's taken on yet because I could just look somewhere else. It's like if you
Yep.
don't want to tell me.
Exactly. That's going to be the challenge is that yeah, you can just look somewhere else, or I don't got time to put in my stuff or whatnot. And then on the flip side, I mean, if you're saying we want to trademark every single paragraph on a website, that's going to be challenging just from a legal team perspective, right? So I don't know. It's interesting to think about.
We have an amazing limited time offer that you won't want to miss. Introducing the Build Your Brand Pillars course from AI Branding Academy, your gateway to mastering both traditional branding and AI-powered marketing strategies. With this course, you'll gain invaluable skills in creating strong brand foundations that stand out in today's competitive market. Perfect for innovation leaders like you. Don't wait. Take advantage of this special offer before it's gone. Head to aibranding.academy.
That's for
Well,
sure.
I think you're right though with the gating because I think gating is probably the easiest, most direct step to start to limit it. But a lot of people haven't set up portal user membership systems before, and they're way more complicated than you think because there's just so many nuances with restricting information, how it's restricted, how do people, when people do hit restricted content and they don't have a user, like how do they set up a user? Like there's a lot of stuff. Do you do a lot of these in terms of the websites you
We
build?
don't do a ton, but it's definitely something that I think I'm going to be kind of like packaging up for sure in the next 6 months because I really see it turning into something. So
Hmm.
that'll for sure coming.
Nice. Well, I love that. Any other features that you think are going to start to become like kind of a necessity on websites? I think it's funny because I've been doing this for like 20 years and I'm like the capabilities haven't changed that much. Actually, the capabilities were way cooler when we were all using Flash, right? I mean, you could do awesome animations and you floaty stuff and you could move. It was almost like a game.
There was some
But
fun stuff. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it was super easy to implement. So it was like everybody had these crazy things on their websites. And now it's like, you look at it and you're like, oh, we can't do anything like that anymore.
Anything, it all looks the same. It all, I I'd like to see some websites come along that doesn't look exactly the same as every other website, but without getting too wacky, like we used to do, like you said, in Flash and stuff, and having like mystery menus and stuff. I mean, it's hard to say.
Yeah, I
That
think
would be
it's I think there will be some bigger advances, and I do think that websites will change as soon as capacity increases. Because really, right now we're just so restricted by internet speed, and then I don't know, privacy. Well, not in America, but if you look at like the European websites, like the GDPR or privacy restrictions are really limiting the amount of stuff that you can do in terms of disclosure and collecting information. Do you
yeah.
think that that might happen in America?
I think it'll start to a little bit at some point. Enough people get sued where they're going to have to put in some restrictions. Um, I mean, another thing I see maybe coming is even more and more personalization. I mean, there's a lot of personalization already, in the web, but I think in the future we'll start seeing stuff that you and I can both go to the same website and have a completely different experience and get different content
Mm.
of who we are, right? And
Ooh, let's talk
um,
about that because I have my theories about kind of reconfigured websites based on user preferences.
yeah,
Is that what you're thinking?
that's what I'm thinking. Yeah, exactly. Especially for the bigger corporations and the bigger, sites that have just thousands and thousands of pages of content and different avenues and different choose your own adventure sort of endings that you could get to, right? Those types of sites, I think will, when you get there, you're going to have your own feel and your
Mm.
own, content served up that is based on your preferences and based on who you are and where you are.
Ah, I love that. Well, and technically, we could already do some of that stuff if you said,
Yeah,
like, hey, they land on the homepage of the website and you say, hey, do you want the bare minimum or do you want all the information? And you select one and then it reconfigures based on that. But not even reconfigure. What we would do today is we just build two websites essentially. But what you're talking about is like a dynamic process of reconfiguration that's done. I mean, the only way I see it being used like widespread use is if it's almost automatic, like it's a plugin, like, oh, the plugin, and then it does all the crap.
exactly. It's
But
it's something automatic. It's not something you necessarily choose. It's just something that somehow that the website is tracked you in some sort of a way that it knows kind of what kind of stuff that you like, inherently. And then as you interact with that more and more, it learns more about you and then changes it.
there you go. Yeah. Well, I mean, and really that's what AI does is pattern recognition. So I think if you had an AI that was tracking your behavior and I don't know, your content consumption to realize like, oh, Matt really likes articles, but he doesn't like long articles. He likes 500 word articles. Like that's the amount of
You know me.
information.
It's like you're already tracking.
Yeah, but and then thanks to generative AI, as long as you have the formulas in there, in terms of the content that can be reconfigured, then yeah, I don't see why all of that's not possible. Even today, I think it could be.
Right. I mean, I think it just would just take that user to interact with that website, probably in some way and, manually put in permission of, hey, this is my email. And then once you get an email, from that website or from that organization, then you've clicked a few buttons, then you're into their ecosystem, and
Yeah,
then it can really work.
I love that. Now, where do you see, say, the AI chatbots coming in? Because I remember it's funny because chatbots were cool like 10 years ago. Like, I remember when everybody's like, oh, the chatbot, it'll make the sales for you on your website with you doing nothing. And I'm like, I don't think that's real. And I think maybe
I
it can
think that
work.
maybe I still think that people are always going to want to have some sort of a human experience, and I think that the chatbot stuff is very helpful and is like a really great FAQ section, right? So you can
Yeah.
get all the top level stuff figured out that you would normally have to, in the old days, pay an admin to sit there by the phone to pick up and answer questions. I think that's what the chatbots are kind of always going to be good for. I don't see them replacing a salesperson, though. A good salesperson that can actually talk to somebody and explain why or why not you should be, buying some sort of a product and what the like little intricacies
Yeah,
are.
well, and that's the funny part because people think that you could just, oh, I'll just plug all the information to AI and it'll just figure it out. It's like, nah, the AI, well, what we do as people is we read each other constantly, right? It's not like, oh, hey, Matt, how's it going? You're like, good. And then I'm like, okay, well, I have the information. He's good. Like that's the end of the story. Like if I was a robot, yeah, I got the user input, like I'm set. But a person knows like no, there's a lot of nuance in that answer just by itself. Plus I'm going to project my own perception of how I feel and what I think of you based on my previous conversations with you, and then now all of that is incorporated into you saying good, and then now the conversation might go a completely different way versus an
Right.
AI will just be like, got the info. I'm good. Hey, he's good. So now let me do my good script.
It doesn't build the same kind of trust, right? It's
Mhm.
like, I mean, I think you can only trust a machine so far, right? Because you just inherently, I think I feel like I know that at some point that machine's going to break or there's going to be a bug or a glitch or something's going to happen. Whereas like, and that'll only get me so far. And then, but if I talk to a human and really get, especially if you're buying like a high ticket item, I mean, you want to know that what you're buying is worth it and isn't going to break or isn't going to, lead you down the wrong direction. And I think sometimes you can only get that feeling from talking to a person, right? And like it's a kind of judging the emotion that they put into it and kind of feeling it out that way.
Yep. No, and I think it's possible. Like eventually the AI could get that good, but right now
Eventually, maybe.
I think we just don't have the capacity. We don't have the energy. And especially for an individual solution. Because when people talk about AI, they're really talking about big business AI, where it's like, oh, yeah, I could do it. It's smarter than a PhD student or whatever. And you're like, yeah, maybe the university can afford that. But
But ours is an assistant.
yeah,
It helps us
ours
get
is
to the
$20 a month.
yeah, it helps us get to the end point faster. It helps me grow my business, in a way that maybe I wouldn't have been able to do a couple of years ago because, maybe the stuff that's doing is like an admin level sort of a job that, as a small business, it's hard for some of us to afford a, $30 an hour employee even, right, just to do that stuff. But if you can have something, like a bot assistant in there to kind of get through some of the beginning stages of that sales process and then take it and kind of take them home.
Hmm. I like that. Yeah, yeah, almost like just the onboarding process. Like, okay, you've made it to this point, and so now we're gonna up level you to the human who's gonna tell you all the information you want to know, kind of thing. Which is
Yeah.
funny because it's, with just in terms of using robots instead of humans. There's actually a website. I gotta find the name for it, but there's a website where your AI agent can hire a person to answer questions to make them better. Which I thought
Fascinating.
was hilarious.
Fascinating.
Well, and,
Wow.
and that's where I think we're heading. I think it is going to be an integration of the two. One's not going to destroy the other because they're both necessary. Even people in jail, like let's say that you did have the super duper AI that was going to, smarter than every human, could make other AI, blah, 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 blah. It still doesn't have content, and that's what humans are perfect at is content creation. So I think we're
Hmm.
going to be okay. And that's why I always tell people, I'm like, hey, build your website, fill it with as much content as possible, and systematically or do it systematically if you can, which is really hard for people to get. But in terms of just collecting some of the original content, do you have any tips for how to get the information you need out of a client?
Oh, wow. That could be that's as a web designer and marketer, that's typically the hardest thing to do. If they don't already have an internal content team to kind of give you the stuff, that can be the most challenging thing. It's just constant communication, really, and having just a clear system and a clear process that you need to go through in order to kind of get their website up and rolling. And you don't go forward on any step in the process unless you get that content from them. And whether it's they give it to you that they've written it, or you get them onto a Zoom or into a meeting and flesh it out with them. I think in some spots. And yeah, I mean, that's where I'm going to be going with it this year too is, if any of them are kind of like balking, I'm just going to start creating the content, and then, we'll just do rough drafts and we'll use the AI to do it. And, hopefully maybe we've got them through, a brand pillar system so that we can sort of, confidently create some content that really is geared towards their brand. And then they'll just have to come back and edit it and say that's working and that's not working. And then,
Nice.
yeah.
Well, that's better, because I remember one website, I just couldn't get the client to give me any information. And so I wrote one paragraph and I used that same paragraph throughout the entire website. And it was like a 20-page website. And they didn't care. And so I was like, okay, I mean, it looks cool.
I
But
like to know there's different types of like lorem ipsum. I don't know if you've ever done. There's like pirate ipsum and Arnold Schwarzenegger ipsum and cupcake ipsum and stuff. So you can go get filler words
okay.
that's like lorem ipsum. So I used to do that, but I think right now I think my next strategy is really just if they're just not giving it to me and we've waited and I'm just going to write it with AI.
Yeah. Well, even AI would help with your interview process too, because really, if you just had a conversation, like we're having a conversation, I'm going to transcribe this video into, words using Descript, and then that's how I get the summary. It's how I get the title. And, for you, you could probably do the same thing where it's like record and, pull the content that'd be good for a homepage. Doot, 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 and then boom, it's done. Or here's the outline, here's the headlines for the homepage. Give me content for these headlines based on the transcription.
Yeah.
Oh, it'd be like 5-second task. I mean, that's
Mhm.
that's awesome. Yeah.
And I
Cool
think
job.
for the smaller sites, for the smaller companies, for those companies that I just need a website kind of companies,
Yeah.
I think that'll be fine. I mean, for them because they just need something that looks good and sort of sounds good as well. And then, the ones that need to take it to the next level will engage with you more and be, more involved and be, put more skin in the game as far as like getting that content right.
Nice.
And
Love
you'll be
that.
able to grow with them more. So I think, I like to work with all kinds of different sizes of businesses. And I think, all businesses deserve a chance to kind of have some great stuff. So I think there's, different levels of things. So the starting ones, and those guys will probably have their website for, a couple, maybe a handful of years even, where they don't do anything to it. And then maybe something happens where like, oh my God, business has exploded. Now we really need to do more to it. Then you take them up to a level where, okay, now we're doing stuff like the podcast and, weekly or daily blog type thing, and then have different levels of that.
Oh, I love that. And actually now there's plugins. I actually have a website, AmericanBaseballClub.com, built for my son. And I have a AI app on there where you basically pre-prompt it and then you create a list of topics and they'll produce one article per day based on the open AI API. And it's pretty decent. It depends on the content though, because
For sure.
technically I don't know that much about baseball. So most of the time I still have to have somebody who knows about baseball review this stuff and be like, is this good? So it does help a lot, but at the end of the day, it's like you need a professional, check it out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you're going to want to put out something that's of quality, you always need a professional to kind of look at it at the end of the day, just to make sure that it's right. So that it's not hallucinating or making stuff up. Right.
Yeah, well, it's kind of funny because it's if you watch a movie, like let's say tennis movie, like Wimbledon or something, like your average person would go in and watch and be like, "Oh, that was great. They played great tennis." Your tennis player will go in and be like, "That's wrong, and that's wrong, and you can't even do that." That move was impossible, or they just look terrible, and
Mhm.
but your average person doesn't know. So I think
Yep.
that's the danger. But most people won't even notice anyways. They'll just be like, this is a pretty website and it has words on it. That's it.
Yep. Yep.
Well, this has been great. I think it's a interesting take. I love the perspective of kind of where it could go, how AI is kind of helping your process for onboarding clients faster and better, and making sure that they get content whether they put in the effort or not. But that's fantastic. So is that if people need a website, they can come to you?
Absolutely. Yeah. You can find me on just my website, mgostudios.com.
Nice. Well, definitely go there. We'll put the link to your LinkedIn as well, so people can find your information there. Very happy to have you part of the team. I think it's funny because the people who have done a lot of this stuff and are now embracing AI, I think are going to be the future of marketing versus the people. And I was telling you about my troll argument before. They're
Yeah.
basically like, no, everything's staying the same, and I'm like, it better not.
Change. Things have to change and evolve. And, I mean, Gary Vee likes to say, back, a couple hundred years ago, people were still plowing fields with their mules and by hand. And then the tractor came, and look, they're still farmers, but
Oh
we're
yeah.
feeding them now,
Oh yeah,
right?
I say the same thing about CAD software and engineers and X-ray machines and doctors. Like,
I'm old enough and have been doing art and design long enough to where I remember when hitting the drop shadow button in Photoshop made me feel like I was cheating and that I was throwing my art career away.
you weren't doing the work by manually creating shadows. No, well, it's same thing with graphic designers and Canva, where you're like, that's not real graphic design. I'm like, who cares? It doesn't.
I think it just all depends on the user, I
It
mean, it's
does.
cool that you can do real graphic design with. How far you're going to get with it is another thing, but it's good for a lot of things. It solves a lot of problems for a lot of small businesses and a lot of marketing teams and stuff that just don't have the wherewithal to go to learn, the Adobe
Not just
suite
not
because
practical.
it's
It's
not.
not practical, not really necessary most of the time. That's the thing that the professionals don't want to hear ever, which is like, yes, it's not good. However, it doesn't matter. Like it does fine. Or it's the only thing that we're able to do right now, and that's good enough, you know.
I'll take Canva over PowerPoint any day of
That's so true. I was originally one of the hard converts because I've been using Photoshop for 20 years or whatever. But yeah, as soon as I started needing to share, that's actually the turning point for me was I couldn't share the information as easily because trying to teach somebody how to use Photoshop versus trying to teach somebody how to use Canva, you're talking about a rowboat versus a 100-foot yacht. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, of course. This is
yeah,
easier.
too much. It's too much.
Well, it's awesome. Well, if anybody needs a website, please check out Matt's website. We'll put a link in the description. Thanks a lot, Matt. This has been fantastic. Glad to have you. You're one of our newest AI branding partners. And so if anybody needs to, wants to get into AI branding, needs a blueprint, needs to create your brand pillars, go to Matt. Matt knows what to do. And, just so you should always start your projects there because they'll go so much smoother when people know what the brand is. So thank you so much, Matt. Appreciate your
Thank you.
time. All right. Thank you so much for listening. This has been the AI Branding Podcast, where we talk about marketing, branding, content, and AI all in one, and trying to give you tips on how to prepare for a future powered by AI and vastly different from the way things are right now. Perfect. That's great. You want to smile at the camera real quick? Get a picture. Oh, wait. Shoot. Hold on one. Gotta block it so I could. So let me do it. All right. Now smile at the camera. Perfect. All right. I'm gonna try to put this together. I'll probably get
Cool.
this out by next week, and then I'll send you all the info to share.
Hey, I got a shirt on today that I think you're gonna